Hello, good morning, good afternoon, where you are. So, welcome to Microsoft Community Podcast, where we share insights from the community experts to stay up to date with Azure. Uh, my name is Nicholas, and I'll be your host today. In this podcast, we'll dive into the theme Azure AI. We're using Python, but before we get started, I would remind you to follow us on social media so we never miss an episode, and it helps us reach more amazing people like yourself. So today in this podcast, we have a special guest called Marlene. Makahami.
Yeah,
Sorry, I
right.
couldn't pronounce it properly. Can you start by introducing yourself, please?
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Nicholas. Like Nicholas mentioned, my name is Marlene, and I am a developer advocate at Microsoft. I am relatively new to this role. I just recently moved to London, and my focus in this role is artificial intelligence and Python. It's Python specifically on Azure, and really trying to sort of make samples or code examples for the Python community that use Azure OpenAI or other sort of Azure Microsoft services. So yeah, I've been in the role for, I want to say a couple of months now. I don't know, maybe like 4 months or so. But yeah, really enjoying it.
That's right. So before we dive in, what makes you interested in your role
Right.
that you love? So what makes you passionate about your role?
Yeah, so I am someone who has been in the Python community for a number of years now. So I was, volunteering. I'm originally from Zimbabwe and was volunteering years ago. I want to say maybe like 6 years ago in the community. I had an organization teaching girls how to code called ZimboPy. This was in Zimbabwe, and the goal was to teach Zimbabwean girls how to code in Python. And I really at that time, I really fell in love with the Python programming language, and also fell in love with the Python community as well. I think there's such a great global Python community, and the language itself, I think, is really beautiful. There's lots of people who have like, who think Python is super slow, or who have like lots of hate for Python, but I think it's such a beautiful language. I think it's so elegant.
It's quite easy to understand and call it like Bash and different language.
Yeah, exactly.
Java as well, so it's more readable.
Yeah, I feel like it's very readable. I think that it feels pretty intuitive to me, and Python is one of the main languages that people use as like an introductory language as well. So in my experience, it's been one of the better languages to get started learning something new. And I think the range with Python is also quite large. So you can, be teaching a beginner how to get started with for loops, and all the way up to creating, machine learning programs with it, or I don't know, some really complex AI stuff. And so I think the fact that you can really do a wide range of things with the language makes me specifically passionate about Python. And then I'm also very interested in AI, and I have been interested in AI for a while now. And I just started like several years ago, kind of experimenting on my own and just trying to build out. If you actually follow my GitHub, which is like the same, it's Marlene ZW. I share quite a lot of like random AI projects there on GitHub, which are just like anything that I think feels creative, anything that I think is interesting, I'll usually share there. So all of those things I think have made me really sort of passionate about the role.
Plus, I saw that you part of the Python Foundation board. So
yeah.
How did you feel being nominated by someone in the board?
Yeah, so I was actually on the Python Software Foundation board for almost 5 years. This was 2 years ago now. I was on the board, and I was nominated by someone in the community, actually someone, her name is Lorena Mesa, and she was serving on the board. She was running PyLadies Chicago at the time. And when I was in Zimbabwe and I was running this nonprofit for teaching girls how to code in Zimbabwe, we had done like a collaboration together. And the board was just about to elect a new round of directors. And really one of the focuses was to move away from just having people in the US be the only people that are part of the PSF board, because the goal is to actually make Python as globally diverse as possible. So really having good representation from around the world. And so she thought I would be a good fit. And I ran that year. I didn't think I would make it, to be honest, because there were so many people running from like Google and like Disney or whatever. And I wasn't sure if I would make it.
So what kind of community activity you need to do to be nominated in the board? Is it just is it just like open source, like on GitHub, creating programs, sharing it?
Yeah, so I think it's a mix of things. I would say the board is less technically focused. So having a technical background is preferable, I would say, or it's a positive thing. And you have really technical people on the board. Even right now, I think Simon Wilson, who does like a bunch of stuff, Wilson that does like a bunch of stuff around LLMs. I think he has the package LLMs, the Python package there, and he's on the board right now. But I don't think that you need to have like a super strong technical background necessarily. I think with the board, it's mainly about community. So are you part of a strong local Python community? Are you getting involved in like organizing events, things like that? And or maybe are you running a podcast, for example, sharing the knowledge that you have? I think it's more about, are you someone who is interested in community building is more so what I would say the goal of board people would be, rather as compared to technical people.
Okay, so it's more about soft skill, tech leadership side.
Yes,
technical.
to me that's what it is more about, for sure. Yeah, but you do have to be voted in, and it is Python people that are voting you in. So I think most of the time it helps if you have somewhat of a technical background, just because they know that then you're part of the community. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Okay, that's fine. You're also part of PythonCon Africa. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I was the first director, or I was the first chair for PyCon Africa, and this was a couple of years ago. So at that time, I had really just started getting involved with the Python community, and I had been part of PyCon Zimbabwe, which was a local event.
Yeah.
Oh, hello. Oh no. Hello.
Hello. I can hear you.
Oh, sorry, you can still hear me. I don't know what happened. I think Teams just opened for some reason. Let me close Teams. But at the time I was involved in a local community for PyCon Zimbabwe, and I had started helping out with the PSF quite a lot. And something I would notice, I would usually go and I would give talks on behalf of the PSF at different African PyCons, so in different countries. So I think that year I went to South Africa and Namibia and like Nigeria, and had also done some events in Zimbabwe. And in those times, I think I kept hearing from people that, oh my gosh, why don't we have a PyCon Africa just like EuroPython is there, or just like PyCon US or APAC, PyCon APAC is there. And a lot of people were thinking that, for us to actually collaborate and start to build stuff across the continent that can affect people across Africa, it would be great if we had like a big conference that we can all come together once a year and meet and discuss ideas and build things together. And so I kept on having those discussions, and then at some point talked to a couple of people and decided that I would go ahead and chair it. And there were a couple of other people, a big group of people from the PyCon Ghana community, the Ghanaian Python community, that really helped with that and really were part of that core organizing committee that started. Also someone called Daniele Procida, who is part of EuroPython, actually. He was also a big part of getting that off the ground too. And so that was the first sort of Pan-African Python that we had a couple of years ago. And there's going to be another PyCon Africa now. I'm no longer the chair, but there's a new PyCon Africa that's going to be happening this year, I think in October or November. So that's exciting as well.
So is that like a big, massive conference for everyone?
I would say it's
different, like community, Python community come together.
Is the Python community in Africa large? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So is it a conference in Africa where people come together?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it's a large Python conference in Africa. This year it's going to be in Ghana, I think, as well. I'm not sure it's going to be next year, but I think they're going to move next year. And yeah, it's supposed to be people from all over Africa that are coming together to build stuff with Python. So I think it should be pretty exciting. Yeah.
Okay. You can probably go back and visit if you want to. But
that will be a good excuse for me to go back and get out of the London winter.
On holiday.
To be honest, yeah.
Well, it's probably it's a lot hotter over there, I think, than here.
Yeah,
I think it's like 26 here.
Oh yeah, I mean, right now it's boiling. Like today is so hot, but I mean, when it's not hot, yes, I will probably go.
Yeah, it's like 26. Okay,
yeah.
So in regards to AI, because I know you love Python and you love AI as well, so you like working both of them together. So how, in your opinion, how does Python contribute with helps AI, like in particular with Azure?
So I think a lot of the AI APIs that we have available, Python is one of the major languages that's supported. So for example, Azure, and some people may be listening to this and you've never heard of what Azure OpenAI is. So Azure OpenAI is kind of like the Azure flavored version of the OpenAI API. And so anything that you can do with the OpenAI API, you can do with Azure OpenAI, but with the added advantage of there's like some security stuff that you can do with Azure OpenAI. There's a bunch of other things that you can do that come with having using a platform like Azure to be able to sort of deploy a model. But all of the models that are available, and I will say that it's not just OpenAI stuff that Microsoft has on with Azure. It also is like lots of different other large language models are available, like Phi3, and I think specifically how it all connects with Python is that the language is supported, and you have a lot of samples that we are creating. My team is creating a bunch of different samples, and actually, I think in this call, I'm going to just show you a demo of some of the things you can do with Azure OpenAI and Python to build out, whatever it is that is the more cutting edge stuff that's being built with AI, you should be able to do it with Python. So I think particularly for Python developers, switching and becoming an AI first developer is easy, or like relatively easy compared to other languages, just because most of the things in AI are being built with Python, or Python is the language of choice when you're trying to support an API. So I would say that's how I see the two connecting.
Okay, so if someone wants to be like an AI engineer or if you want to go into AI, they can first learn Python and scale up, because
I would say that if someone wants to be an AI engineer, there's so many other things you should probably learn, to be honest. But I would say knowing Python is definitely, it's definitely something you should know, because I think that's used in almost every AI space at the moment. It's good to know some of the lower level languages, maybe have some C++. But I would say Python is probably the language you'll be using most of the time to actively build applications or build things that interact with other LLM models, I would say. Yeah.
So for those who's listening, Python is not that hard to learn like C++, because it's more of a, because with Python is more readable than C sharp. So, and there's more resource available for help learning from Microsoft because they support it more.
Yeah.
Okay, so what, in your experience, what other like Python libraries or tools would people be interested in using to develop an AI project in Azure?
Yeah, I mean, so right now I have been, okay, I mean, today I'm going to show you a project that we have been working on. There's a library called PromptFlow that we have been developing here at Microsoft internally, and it goes along as well with something called Prompty, which is almost like Prompty is more a file type that we are developing to help people with prompt engineering. So if you're someone that keeps a lot of prompts or wants to iterate on your prompts to make sure that your model, the app that you're working, you're developing the prompts and you're saving the prompts, and you can cross collaborate with other people and share prompts effectively, Prompty is probably a good choice for that. It's kind of like a markdown file, except instead of .md, you'll be using .prompty. And so I think it's really interesting. I'm going to show it just now, like a little peek into what that looks like. But it's one of the tools I would suggest. Yeah.
You could show it now, or we could show it later if you're ready, because I've started.
Yeah, sure. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And I just hope, actually, let me share my full screen so that I'm not switching. Why is it not stopping sharing? Okay, good. Let's share the full screen. Okay. So, can you see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Great. So this is a project that is a creative writing assistant multi-agent project. And this is a project I've been working on quite a lot recently. And basically, it's a project that will allow you to, you give it instructions, you give it context, and it then creates it creates a document for you. So I'm going to just go ahead and show you an example. I'm just going to hope that it's just going to work off the bat. So this is, and I will share the link with you, Nicholas, after this, so that if people want to try it out themselves, they can. So I'm just going to go ahead and launch it so that we just know what it looks like as the app.
Oh, it's built using Flask.
Yeah, currently it's built using Flask. We are thinking about migrating right now to Fast API. But at the moment it is using Flask. So so the back end is Flask, but the front end is TypeScript. So let me go ahead and run that. Oh, actually, let me see. Let me make sure the port. So GitHub has this weird thing where it needs the
so
port.
Flask API and Flask is two different things, right? The API, Flask API is the back end, and Flask is like an application in the front end.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. It's hang on. Yes. So the back end of this application, where we get the server from, is using. So I have two terminals open right now. So the back end here is running Flask, and then the front end is running TypeScript. So it's a little bit different. Let's go ahead and launch this and open it in the browser, and then I'll show you what it looks like. Yeah. So this is the application that we will be I'm just going to walk you through the details of the code, but I want to show you what it looks like. So this is an example where it's an AI creative team that you're having. And there are three the different parts of this. So the first thing that you'd want to do is you want to give some context to it. So say, for example, we're looking to find the latest camping trends and what people are doing in winter. And then so this is some context that we're giving to the model. And then some instructions you're going to give the model is, can you find the relevant information needed to visit good places to visit? And what will happen is if we say, get to work, it's going to start several processes. So the first thing it's going to start is it's going to kick off a research agent task. So this is using AI agents. And so what the research agent is doing is it's using under the hood Bing, the search API from Bing, and it's generating, if we go to our terminal, Bing it's using function calling to be able to figure out which functions to. So if we actually go to the research agent, if we go to the API here and we look in agents, there are these specific agents here. And mainly for this application, we have a writer agent, a researcher agent, and a product agent and an editor agent. So for example, we start with, as you can see here, the research agent task. And so if we look at that, first, we have this function.json file where we are sort of specifying which functions are going to be available to the large language model. So for anyone watching, I'm assuming you might have some knowledge of function calling with OpenAI. And so with function calling, you need to be able to tell the large language model, these are the functions you can use. So for example,
sorry, so for those who don't know what's a function calling, can you explain what it is? Sorry.
Yeah. So okay. So basically what happens is that let me explain what an agent is first of all. So with in the past with ChatGPT, for example, that's just a large language model. And with ChatGPT, it's great for doing tasks like question and answering, summarization, text generation, things like that. But all of the knowledge that the knowledge that it has to complete their tasks is from pre-trained data. So you're only limited, you're kind of limited by the knowledge that the model was trained on. So if it was trained on information up until 2023, 2022, it's not going to know the latest information. So it's not going to know who's running for president this year, or it won't know like whatever the latest information, because it just wasn't trained on that data. So that data is not available. And so what it means is, and also these large language models, though they can do things like summarization, you can't treat it as like a full assistant. So you can't tell it, hey, can you send me an email? Can you search the internet? At the moment, you're just using pure ChatGPT. You can't do that with a large language model. But now with agents, what we're doing is we're combining a large language model with tools. So you're giving it tools and you're saying, hey, I have these specific tools, which we're going to define in the function.json file. So for example, this is the first tool that we're defining. We're saying, you have a tool called find information. And in this tool, it says what happens is finds information on the web. So this is the description of what the tool does. Finds information on the web given a query. This function uses the Bing search API to find information on the web given a query. The responses must include information about the web and should not be used if you're looking for people, places, or things. And so this is one of the tools one of the functions that we are going to pass to our large language model. So this is just a place where we're going to feed this to the large language model, so it has information to be able to decide which tool to use for a specific task. Because you're going to tell it, hey, can you find information about this? And it will be able to do that because it will know that it has access to these tools. So this function.json file here is where we're going to define the tools that are available. we're going to specify which tools are available. But then we're actually going to create the tools or define those tools in the researcher.py file. So in the Python file is where that's actually happening. So like we saw, we said we have this find information tool, and that's the information we're going to send to the large language model. And then we're going to define that tool here. So here we have this find information function here. And this is going to take in a query, and it's going to use Bing search to be able to take that query from the user and look for information, related information online. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so those are the two things that kind of go hand in hand in terms of you have to feed a large language model the description of what tools it has available, and then actually give it access to the function itself, or it actually, you don't even need to necessarily give it access to that function, but what it will do is it will generate the parameters that are necessary to pass through to this function. So it will create a query. So basically what this is going to say is that to the large language model is create a correct query for us that we can then use to pass to this function. And then what happens next after all of this is that we then will be passing all of these things through to something called a prompty file. And let's just go to the prompty file because I'm not sure how much time we have left. But the prompty file here is where we're then defining the context about what the agent actually does. So we're telling one of the nice things with prompty file is that it gives you a way to iterate on prompts and also to be able to, so this section here, you're able to define which model type that you want to use. Here we can see we're using the Azure OpenAI type of model. We're specifically going to choose the GPT 3.5 Turbo model and this API version. And then we can also specify our parameters here. And then here, this tools line here is just going to bring in everything from this folder so that the prompty file has access to which tools are available, and it will also pass that on to the large language model. And so what the input from the user is going to be the context, which is a string. And the context is what we passed here earlier. It's also going to take in feedback, which is something else that I'll skip over for now. And it's going to take in the instructions that we passed here as well. So it's going to take all those things through. So this is an example. So can you find information about the latest camping trends? Can you find the latest camping trends for what people are doing in the winter, for example? And then we're going to give a system prompt so that the large language model knows how to behave. So what is the research agent behaving as? So we're telling it, you're an expert researcher that helps put together information for a writer who's putting together an article. You have access to a variety of tools that can help. Given some context and writer feedback, you can use these tools to help the writer by formulating expert queries and providing the writer with the information they need. Your queries should be descriptive and match the context and feedback provided. And then we're going to pass through the context that the user gave us. We're going to pass through feedback. We're going to pass through any previous queries, some other information there about market code specific for Bing. And then we're also going to pass in the user instructions. So this is going to make a query or a prompt that will be then passed through to GPT 3.5 Turbo. But this makes it like a bit clearer for you to be able to do that. And so there are a number of this pattern kind of repeats itself with the different agents that are available in this file. And then basically, like we saw, it runs the researcher agent, it runs the writer agent, the editor agent, and then accepts the article. And at the end of it, it generates an article for us at the end.
Okay.
So yeah, so I'm going to stop there. And
that's quite nice.
Hopefully, I kind of explained a little bit of that. Not a lot of time, but yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah,
I think that's quite nice because it's the same. It's just quite nice. It's just a good GUI, better GUI than the playground, but you just pass the instruction and
yes,
give it a context, and it'll just do what it is.
exactly. Yes, exactly. So at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make task automation better.
Yeah.
So this creative process of if you just want to write an article to be written for you,
Yeah.
and this example even has, you're able to reference products. So in that example that I had, you're able to reference products that were stored in the Azure AI vector store. And those will be referenced in the article that's generated for you. So it's a way that, people who are wanting to sort of automate these sorts of things can do that quite nicely.
What kind of use case would people use that for in project?
I think that for creative teams, if there's a creative team or a team that wants to, a startup or something like that, that
Yeah.
needs to generate a lot of content around their product, and they want to make sure that the product is written about in a good way. So you can, and because of Prompty, the researcher can use, for example, the researcher can use GPT 3.5, but the writer can use GPT 4. And so you're kind of saving money, and you know that for writing, you want the writing to be really good. And so you want to use the latest model, but access to the latest model is usually more expensive. But for some parts of this, you don't need to be using GPT-4 end to end. And so because it's kind of modular, you can separate those two things out. And also, like, if there's popular topics, you can then quickly iterate and generate content that kind of picks up on a trend and pump out articles for that also talk about your product.
Okay, so you can use more than one module in an agent?
You
Or just
can.
one?
You can use more than one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's to save on costs and stuff. So that's quite cool.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so going back to AI, so from your experience, what are some of the best practice when using Python for AI? So is it just a good practice from writing Python in general?
Yeah, I think one thing that we talk about quite often is keeping your code as modular as possible. You want your code to be legible. You want people to be able to jump into your code and understand it right away. And if people are struggling to understand what's going on with your code, I think that's a problem. So you want to be able to kind of make your code as clear as possible, try to break it up into as many sections as you can, or the function. I think, yeah, I'm more for, for example, how the code was structured in what I saw we had the one file for researching, we had another file for editing. And that to me just makes it easier for someone to be able to jump into the project. So I would say modularity is really big. And then specifically in AI with Azure OpenAI, which is one of the reasons why I would encourage someone to use Azure OpenAI over pure OpenAI, is because we're really pushing keyless authentication. There've been a bunch of examples recently where people have checked in keys to GitHub or something. You're using API keys in your code, and you forget that the API keys are there, and people can hard code them in. I actually think Rabbit did that recently, the Rabbit project, the hardware one. And then they checked in their API keys, and that puts your project in so much risk. And people can easily, it's easier to hack you. You also, maybe someone finds the API key and then is running the project, and it's just using up your tokens, and you get this large bill at the end of the day as well. So for us, I think at Microsoft, we were really talking about security best practices recently. And keyless authentication with Azure OpenAI, I think, is the best way to go about that. So, yeah.
Okay, so it's not, because I know you can store your Azure OpenAI key in Key Vault, but you mean as in keyless, that you wouldn't need a key?
You don't even need a key with keyless at this point. It's one step better than Key Vault.
Wow.
Key Vault is amazing, but it's one step up if you don't even want to have keys at all, which is what we are aiming for, to have all of our samples to be completely keyless is our goal at the moment. So
okay, because
yeah.
that would be quite hard to secure it then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would mean like it's just difficult to like, really get into an application, which is really good, which is best practice for security for sure.
Yeah, I guess you just have to understand and put in your best practice, like doing the all back security stuff. If you secure your resource in Azure, then you
Yeah.
secure the OpenAI module. And
Yeah. I mean, I think if it's, do you mean like securing OpenAI, the pure API, or what do you mean by that? Sorry.
no, like if you secure the endpoint, secure the resources, so give the permission who need access to it,
Oh, okay.
and those
Permission
things.
set. Yeah.
Yeah, those things.
Yeah, that's
Then it will
exactly.
be safer.
Then it's much safer. Exactly. If you just focus on best practices all the way through, even
Yeah.
to be able to just do keyless authentication, I think you need to have the permissions set in Azure. So you do need to have like the correct permissions and things already set. So yeah, I think security best practices are really big right now, because there's been a lot of hacks and things like that around.
Yeah.
So trying to make sure that doesn't happen.
Is there any other like trend you see that's evolving, coming in the near future with Python and AI and Azure OpenAI? You don't have to. You don't have to say if it's secret.
No, I mean, right now I am very excited
But I
about
think you mentioned one, the keyless authentication. So that
keyless authentication for sure is a big
yeah.
one. I also am very excited about autonomous agents. I think that's very exciting. And I don't know if you've heard of AutoGen before. Have you heard of AutoGen?
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's coming out of Microsoft research. And I think they're doing some really cool stuff around it. There's a bunch of, I think they're actually planning. I'm not sure if
Because
okay, let me not say that. But
yeah, from what I know, AutoGen is like a agent that you can link
yeah,
up with Azure OpenAI.
yeah, it's agentic. You can use Azure OpenAI with it. It's really exciting, the things I have seen being created with it. And I think it's one step to moving us towards more autonomous agents, which I think is the future that we are trying to get closer and closer towards. I think when we get to agents acting completely autonomously, then I think then we would have achieved something with AI, something really significant. So
So
yeah,
autonomously, like without any manually,
without
like
any manual
human.
code
Yeah,
stuff. Yeah, like right now, we're still having to do a bunch of stuff manually. But I
yeah,
think in the future, we're actually moving closer towards some things where we probably won't even need to do anything manually. And I think that's quite cool. I think there's a lot that can be done there.
yeah.
Yeah.
A lot can probably be said about the financial impact that would have if you switch your code from public, not just from private to public. That would be
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
So just since you're quite active in Python and AI, how do you stay up to date with it? Is it just be more involved in the community?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I try my best to keep up to date with what conversations are happening.
Yeah.
I'm really active on Twitter. If people want to follow
Yeah.
me on Twitter, I'm pretty active there. And I think Twitter is probably the best place to get the information the fastest. I also think it's good to do deep dives every now and then into topics. And I think the ACM, the Association for Computing Machinery, they have like a great page for research that is coming out. And sometimes I'll sift through the research that's coming out there and try and stay up to date with what are the latest techniques. I'm also really a big fan of LangChain, and have been sort of contributing to that recently quite a lot. And I think LangChain, I usually read their documentation because I think their documentation is really good. And it's a great way for learning about some of the latest approaches to things. So I would also recommend that as well.
For those who don't know what LangChain is like a service that hook into multiple services with different with Azure OpenAI or a different kind of AI.
Yeah, you can use Azure OpenAI with it. It's kind of like an abstraction for any other large language model that you want to use. I've created a bunch of samples with LangChain and Azure OpenAI, and I'm trying to get part of helping maintain the Azure OpenAI side of things in LangChain. Yeah, I think there's lots of exciting things that you can build. It's something that you can use to try and if you need to create an app really quickly, I would suggest using that for sure.
Yeah, and I would probably advise don't overuse it. If it's if you're thinking of a project, don't always assume that LangChain is the best option.
Yeah,
you want to be the best option for your use case. If there's no need for using LangChain, don't use that.
Don't use it. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. You're so right.
Okay. So as this episode's come to end, we love to hear about people. So are you planning on going to any tech events or Python events or anything in January?
Yeah, I'm
that could be going to Ignite.
I'm not going to be at Ignite this year.
Yeah.
Hopefully next year. I will be at PyCon Estonia this year. I'm giving a keynote at the conference in September, which is exciting. And I'm also going to be involved in the AI tour. And Microsoft has a couple of stops around the world for the AI tour coming up for this next year. And I do think London has a stop for that, which I'm excited about. So yeah, keep an eye out for that.
Because I think they did it this year already. The first one was, I think it was London, then it goes to Paris, and then would it restart again? London and then go Paris.
It's gonna do the same thing, I think. I think so. So I'm excited to be actually officially in the team, and we'll be very involved in that for sure.
Awesome. So you probably be traveling quite a lot.
Yes, maybe. We'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see.
That's quite cool.
Yeah.
So before we close up, how can other people get in touch with you to learn more about Python or AI, or if there's any questions?
Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. I'm pretty active there. I'm Marlene_ZW. So yeah, if you want to chat, feel free to DM me on Twitter. I'm also on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out to Marlene Mangami on LinkedIn and connect with me there and just send me a message. And I try to reply. I'm sometimes late and slow to reply, but I will reply at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, no worries. Thanks for joining this episode, Marlene. So in a few weeks, we are going to try to put it on some podcasts on Spotify, Apple Music and stuff, along with YouTube. So thanks for joining. Bye.
Bye.